In this Blender video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do in-game animation for your Blender 3D video games. So just a reminder that I am using Blender 2.79b, which is the last version of Blender that supported the game engine. So that's why Blender might look a little bit older if you're watching this now. Alright, so I've got a simple little setup here where I can move forward, left, right, and I can move backwards, and I've got a little jump there. Okay, I'll press escape. I'm going to turn this red cube into an enemy that's going back and forth, and then if we have enough time, I'll try to make this green cube an elevator that will go up when I touch it. Okay, so let's get started on animation. So I'm going to select the enemy cube by right mouse clicking on it. I'm going to take this bottom window here that's now a logic editor, and I'm going to come down here in the bottom left hand corner, click on this little icon, and I'm going to change it back into a timeline. I'm now going to drag this down about an inch. Then I'm going to come up here in the 3D window in the top right hand corner. I'm going to click with my left mouse button and drag downward, and that's going to give me a horizontal split. Okay, about there. And then I'll take this new middle window here, and I'll come down to the bottom left hand corner of it, click on the icon, and I will change it into something called a dope sheet. There we go, a dope sheet. And a dope sheet and the timeline are the two main editors that you want to open when you are doing beginning animation. Dope sheet comes from the old days of traditional cell animation, and the timeline helps you see your animation overall and just kind of get some of the controls and really lay things out. But really you want both. The dope sheet is more for editing your keyframes and moving them around. Okay, so if this is your first time animating, you tell Blender what the keyframes are, the most important moments of the animation, and then Blender will then try to figure out all of the in-between frames. All right, so here's how you do it. Down here in your timeline, you have a whole bunch of controls down here that look like an old-timey VCR or DVD player, if you remember what those are. You have a box here that says your start frame and your end frame, and then this next box here tells you what frame you are currently on. You can put your mouse pointer in the timeline and left mouse click and drag left and right, and you'll see that those numbers change. I can click on this little button here and go back to the very first frame. That's frame 1. All right, so I'm going to tell Blender to record or remember where this enemy cube is on frame 1. So there is a way that you can record it, but for beginners I suggest doing it manually. So the way that you do that is you simply press the letter I, and that brings up the Insert Keyframe menu. So now we have to decide, what do we want Blender to remember? Is it the location, the rotation, the scaling of that object, or maybe a combination of two of them? Location and rotation, location and scale, location, rotation, and scale. We're just going to be moving the enemy back and forth, so we're going to click on location. And when you do that, down here in the dope sheet, you'll see a whole series of diamonds. Those diamonds are keyframes. And you'll see right here, it says dope sheet summary. It says cube.001. That's because that's the name of this cube. I can go ahead and rename that cube if I want, and it'll change the name. So if I call this enemy 1. If I come up here in the top right hand corner just to show you, this is the outliner view. This shows you everything that's in your scene. So here's cube.001. I'm going to double click it, and I'm just going to call it enemy 1. Okay, press return, and now it's called enemy 1. Now you'll see over here back in the dope sheet, it says enemy 1, and it says that it has something called an action on it, and it shows that it's recording its location. I like to make my dope sheet look nice and simple. So what I'm going to do is right here, see where it shows the name of the object, enemy 1. I'm going to click on the triangle and collapse it. And then there's this top bar here called a summary. You can get rid of that and hide it by clicking on this button here that says summary. And now all you see is just a single keyframe. And I think that that's a lot easier for most beginners. Less is more. Okay, so now in the video game engine, the typical time frame, frames per second, is 60 frames per second, 60. So if I think, how long do I want to give this enemy to get over to the other side? Let's give it 1 second. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click down here in either my dope sheet or my timeline, and I'm going to get to frame 60. Now that doesn't take very long, but what's even faster is to just come down here where it says start, end, in this little box right here, I can click inside, type in 60, press return, and it automatically jumps and snaps right to frame 60. Okay, so now that I've chosen what frame I want the change to occur on, I'm going to come up here to my object. I'm going to press G for grab, X for the x-axis to lock the movement to the x-axis, and I'm just going to slide it over to the other side, and there we go. Now is the third step in animation. I need to tell Blender to remember or record that change. So I'm going to press I to insert a keyframe, and I'm going to choose location. And now you'll see that I have two keyframes, two diamonds. Now down here in the timeline, you'll see these little gold bars, but that's essentially it. If I press play, you'll see, there we are. It plays it. Now it doesn't go back, but I'm going to show you how you can fix that. Okay, so I basically want it to go back because I want this enemy to go back and forth, and I have to avoid the enemy. Now there's two main ways that you can do that. So here's the first way. You can come here to your dope sheet, and if you press A once, you'll select all your frames, just like selecting your objects up here. If you press A again, you'll deselect them all. So one way you could make it come back is you simply take and you right mouse click the first diamond. That means it's selected. Then if you press Shift D, you will duplicate that frame and you can drag it to wherever you want. So maybe I want to have it go to frame 120. And then I just left mouse click, and that's it. So I have frame 1 over here. I'll press play. It goes to the other side, and then because I duplicated the frame, it just comes back. And then there you go. So that's one really easy way to make a loopable or cyclical animation. I'm gonna press A. I'm gonna right mouse click and select that frame that I just made. I'm going to press X, and I'm going to choose delete keyframes. So now you know how to select a keyframe and you know how to delete a keyframe. Now, if I don't like that this is taking 1 second, let's say I want to give it longer, I can just select the frame on frame 60 and press G to grab it and just drag it and give it more time. There you go. So now it is basically taking a little longer. It's moving slower. Not as dangerous. I'm going to undo that. Okay, so I want it to just be 1 second to get over there. All right, so now let's say that I am happy with the animation. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make my timeline, click and drag and make it a little taller, and I'm going to change my timeline window by coming down here in the bottom left-hand corner and click on it, the icon. I'm going to change it to a logic editor. So now I can do a little coding. And I'm going to show you how you can make that animation cyclical, but through the logic blocks. All right. Ooh, and actually, you know what? I just remembered. I forgot one step. Okay, so with my enemy cube selected right here in the dope sheet, for this animation to work in the game engine, we actually have to name that action. So animations are called actions inside the game engine. So right down here, you're going to see a little pop-up menu that says dope sheet. You want to click on that and choose action editor. And then right next to it, it's going to give you a very generic name, cube.001 action. So I'm going to go ahead and just give this something more specific, like enemy 1. Let's see, how about patrol? There we go. Enemy 1 patrol. So that way there's no confusion about it. All right, now that I've named it, I'm going to do the code now. So I'm going to have my enemy selected, and I'm going to come over here to add sensor, and I'm going to set up an always sensor because I want it to always go. Then I'm going to go here to add actuator, and it's going to be an action. I'm going to left mouse click and connect those up. All right. So over here in the action actuator, first thing you want to do is click right here in this blank box, and it's going to show you all of the actions you have to pick from. I only have one to pick from, so that's pretty easy. Then right here it says start frame and end frame. So my start frame was 1. Make sure you press return afterwards. My end frame is 60. Now let's say your animation was 120 frames. You could actually type in a smaller end frame number, and you can actually only use a portion of an animation if you really want. Okay, so now if I come up here to the window and I press P for play, you'll see that I'm in my game, and you'll see it plays, but then it stops. And that's because it reached the end of the animation. And that's because of this little pop-up menu right here. See how it just says play? It's just going to play it once. Well, if I choose, you've got some looping ones here that you can play with. If I choose ping pong, when I do ping pong, it's going to play, and then it's going to do the reverse, and it's going to just keep going ping-ponging back and forth. So that way you don't have to keep it saved me from having to do an extra keyframe, and it's really easy, but whichever you prefer. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm coming up on 10 minutes now, so I'm going to cut this video short as part 1 for just the basics of animation. In part 2, I'll show you how to make a second anime off of this first one and some of the things you have to deal with, and then I'll show you this making this elevator go. Okay, so I will see you in part 2 and possibly in part 3. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.